Hi, this is Peter Teuscher. I'm here with Toby Demker. Thanks for joining us for another podcast where we pick a topic and see where the conversation takes us. Thanks for joining another conversation. Hope you find this one interesting. It's our first one of the new year, and looking forward to it. We just finished. It's our 27th episode, Toby.
All right.
I don't think I want to get in the habit of counting, but it's the first one of the new year anyway. How you doing?
Good. Yeah. Good new start. Looking forward to a new year, new series of podcasts, new conversations. It's all good.
Absolutely, yeah. So we finished off the year with some reflections and some some tips for how to start the new year, or things to do. So did you get into any of that over the holidays, over the break?
Yeah. Yeah. I spent a lot of time on it actually, thinking, reflecting, and doing some of these things. So what I did was I did my yearly alphabet, which is a good. It's a good way to just look back at the year and remembering a little bit what happened and what was important to me, and it sort of wraps up the year. So for me, that's more about maybe not so much quality but quantity, and looking at what happened, what didn't happen, etc. But then we also talked about our vision boards,
Mm.
and these kind of those kind of things. So I actually did that together with my family. We were playing around with the kids, and I asked them if, do you want to draw a picture? So each and one of us drew a picture of the year, and we had dinner together and talked about it. And it was great to do it. This was the first time I did it as a family, which was great because we could see an alignment as a family, what we want to do, but also individually what we want to do, and how can we actually support each other. So I mean, it was family, but it was kind of a team building, team building exercise, almost like that.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah,
awesome. And how did the rest of the family enjoy the process?
and it was great. I didn't expect much because family. If I ask them if they want to do something, usually it's like no. But this time, yeah, no, it worked out great, and they really got into it, thought it was fun and interesting, and for me, it was fantastic, to get this kind of alignment and understanding of what we want to achieve, and understanding what they want to focus on. And like my wife mentioned a few things, and my son said, yeah, he set up a lot of goals for himself. So, and of course for myself as well, to understand what do I want to focus on, and what do I want to emphasize during the year.
No, that's awesome.
Mm.
Well, I did a vision board as well, and well, I did a reflection on the wheel of life. I actually did another wheel of life to just kind of do a quick assessment on, where I am right now in life, and
Mm.
kind of comparing to the last 2 years. And so there's been some great changes, some really positive stuff in my life, and so everything feels like it's on track. But I did identify some things that I want to refocus on and get back to, and so on. So I did a vision board too. I got it on my phone. And you'll see mindfulness is right in the middle.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the things. I have and I don't know if it's a man thing, a male thing, but masculine trait. But whenever there's a challenge, or wherever there's whatever goal, objective, it's always about the doing, right? So
Hmm.
so I know for me, if I'm not feeling great, there's something I got to do, right? Or if I'm stressed, or if there's a challenge, it's all about the doing, right? And I think so. I revisited a book by Thich Nhat Hanh. He's
Oh,
a
yeah.
Vietnamese Buddhist monk.
Yeah.
He's written a lot of great stuff, but just
Especially on mindfulness, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean,
Mm.
he's a mindfulness expert, and so that it just really reminded me that as much as I think this whole COVID situation is, I'm normally a guy that travels a ton, right? There's been years where I've had more than 200 travel days, and there'll be not a week that I haven't been somewhere away from home. And so and I think I I never really appreciated my surroundings as much as I do over these past 2 years of being regularly at home. So,
Mm.
I there's a river runs by the back of my house, and it's lots of green area, and so now every day I go there, and every day I've been, wow, it's just so great to live here, no matter what the weather. It's just and I think I've learned to appreciate it more than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
And but I found, I still find the mind wanders. I do a lot of thinking. I get caught up in
Yeah.
my own thoughts, and I think sort of getting back into a mindfulness. Just having some prompts to be more mindful, I think is something that's really important for me. And
Mm.
actually, on my screensaver, I also put here,
Mm.
it's actually the recommendation from Thich Nhat Hanh is this. It's really simple. Just to pause, take a breath, and then smile. Just
Mm.
find the smile in everything, right? And
Mm.
so just the phone's the thing that you tend to grab a lot, and you have visually at hand. And so I found that was a good way to prompt, because that's the thing with habits, right? You need triggers. We talked about BJ Fogg and his the behavioral psychology around building habits. It's
Mm.
these tiny habits, and so I think having little prompts like that to remind me is good. So that's one of my big ones for the year. Is one of the things that I really want to cultivate is living with lots more mindfulness.
Mm.
And So yeah, I mean, I have other things. I want to continue doing a lot of writing and so on.
Mm.
And actually, the writing requires inspiration, and so I think that's a good segue into what we want to talk about. You picked out a great
The
topic for us to start the year.
Yeah, so okay, good. So the topic at hand, yeah, inspiration. I'm also in a state now where I feel like, okay, well, the context at the in the beginning of the year, Corona, Omicron is on the rise, and we're back into not maybe lockdown mode, but a lot of cancellations and a lot of uncertainty, etc. As well, I mean, that's the way the world sort of works these days. But it's also opened up some space for me in terms of how do I allocate my time in the beginning of the year. So I'm looking at possibilities and inspiration, and I'm thinking about where do I find inspiration? Because well, okay, so you and I, we spoke a little bit about our situations beforehand, but for me personally, right now, I'm in a situation where I'm not really there yet. I don't know exactly what I want to focus on. I have I have different options, and there's different opportunities, but I don't know exactly where do I want to put in my effort. What do I really want to focus on? So I'm thinking a lot about what inspires me. Where do I find inspiration? What does inspiration do to me, etc. So I thought that would be a good topic to start off with. By yeah, as it's the beginning of the year as well. What can inspire you or me during the year?
Yeah,
So to start off with, just talk a little bit about what is inspiration, or what is when we talk about inspiration, what is it, and what happens to us when we get inspired, right? So,
hmm, for
and
sure.
for me, it's really about and what I've read about inspiration before, it's really about three parts. But if so, the first one is about evoking something. So evoking, getting a new idea, or getting a new perspective on things, or making yourself open to new situations. So something happens with you. You're evoking new ideas, or habits, or knowledge, maybe, or something that you new experiences, perhaps. And then it's the transcending part. So that's something when something evokes in you, that it transcends into something new. So a new idea, a new possibility, perhaps, or a new opportunity. And for me, this is really where I feel it in my body, right? It's like you talked about neuroplasticism before, when you create these new connections in your brain. And for me, it's almost like when that happens, you can feel it physically, right? You get this buzz, and it's like, I'm getting really excited about something. Maybe your endorphins start kicking in, and you get excited about what possibilities might be at hand. And that's a great feeling to have. But of course, then what really makes it useful is when you add that approach motivation, or when you put it into action. So how can I utilize this? When you use it for a plan, what do you want to do with it? So I mean, in a coaching context, it would be the planification, or what will you do next? What are the possibilities? What could you do? What couldn't you do, etc. Right? And putting it into action. So for me, I'm really in this search now of thinking, especially the first two stages there. So what might evoke new ideas in me, or new experiences, new opportunities, and then what kind of opportunities might come from that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Oh, I just hit my mic. Sorry about that. Anyway, you're referring to the because it's not like there's a ton of research on inspiration, but the two psychologists that did that research that I think you're referring to, it's Todd Thrash and Andrew Elliott, it's interesting to hear your interpretation of it. Because reading through that stuff, I also, the evocation is, it also refers to the spontaneity, right? Because when they're talking about the conditions under which inspiration happens, it needs to be, it can't be forced, right? You can't put yourself under pressure to, okay, I'm going to be inspired now. And this is the struggle that I have sometimes when I'm trying to write. So sometimes I'll be waiting for the inspiration, or I want to get into the mood, and if you're waiting for that, you can wait for a long time, right?
Yeah.
And then the transcendence piece, the way I understood it was, it's also an element of overcoming some of your habits, some of your automated traits, some of your it's kind of stepping outside of yourself to some degree, right?
Yeah.
Because what you're trying to do is get into that flow state, and really let the ideas flow, rather than having this very mechanical process. And then sort of that the approach motivation they talk about, for me, I understood it as, that's where you find the drive to sort of pursue your dream, right? So and I think the other thing about the transcendence piece is really finding that clarity. And from what you're talking about, that's kind of what you're searching for right now. Is, you've got lots of ideas, but then getting clarity on what it is that you really want. Is that kind of your situation?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, if we go back to where again, to where you start with, what evokes, and yeah, it seems like, well, if you look at that kind of research, you can't force it. You can try to force it, but that kind of naturally inhibits the actual evocation if you're actually trying to force it to happen. However, it seems like you can put yourself in situation where it might be more likely to happen, right? And that might be things that we've been talking about before as well. I mean, how do you awake your creativity, or how do you put yourself into situations where you're open to new ideas, or you're exhibited, or where you can view or hear, or just be approached by new thoughts and ideas, right?
Yeah.
So there's a difference there about how you can maybe facilitate that process, but of course it's not a switch. Now I'm going to be inspired, or whatever, right?
Yeah, and I think there's also this difference between, you can be inspired by something, or you can be inspired to something. So, you have an experience and it inspires you to make a change in your life, or you hear a great, you read a book, or you hear a great talk, and you're inspired by that example, or that whatever that person's been talking about. And I think there is a subtle difference there, and so I think that's important. So I think so. We've started with sort of what conditions do you need in order to be inspired, and
Mm.
then recognizing that there's that sense of inspiration, right? So where you're just feeling good and you feel like, okay, I want to go out and do something now. I don't know
Mm.
what, but you listen to that Tony Robbins talk, and he's really inspired.
Mhm.
You're inspired by that. Whereas when you have an experience, like you go to a workshop, and you really get clarity through the process, and then you're inspired to something. I think that's where, to be inspired to something, that's where you really need that clarity on what you want to go after, rather than, okay, I'm really motivated now, where am I going to focus my energy? Whereas I'm
Mm.
inspired to, I have the clarity, and I want to go for it now.
Yeah, yeah, and I would. In my view, that kind of defines the different stages there, evocation and transcending and this approach motivation. That when you, for instance, I mean, I can get inspired by if I listen to a song and I hear something that I haven't heard before and I haven't thought about it, and it's like, that's a good idea. I didn't realize that you could put this into a song and you could utilize it this that sound or that effect in that way or whatever. For me, that's evocation. A new possibility is born. But the transcending piece is okay. So what would that do? How could I put that into practice? Or what if I put that to a song that I'm working on? What would the result be? But then the approach motivation would be on a larger scale of more detailed plan of how can I actually do this? How can I implement it? So
Yeah, I think I know what you're saying there. So it's like if I watch a TED talk and and I'm really inspired by
mm,
what that person says, but then I think about, well, I can't fit that into my life. Like, you've got your routines and the structure your life has, and there may be a change you need to make in order to make room to pursue that inspiration. Is that kind
mm.
of, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So, and I think frequent, at least for me personally, I'm frequently inspired by, yeah, just whatever random events that occur to me. But then if it doesn't stick to me, then it doesn't happen any. I mean, I don't get into transcending or or just putting it into action. But there are ideas that are evoked there and sort of awakened. Um,
Absolutely, and I have the same experience when I'm reading something or I'm listening to a talk. I mean, this the beauty of our technology today. I mean, there's so many professors of whatever, from psychology to neurobiology or whatever, all these different things I'm interested in, and I'll they'll say something really interesting, and it inspires. Yeah, actually, that's something that I'd like to integrate into, something I'd like to teach or talk about or whatever. And then I'll make a note for myself. And then ideally, I'd like to actually sit down and write for an hour. But,
mm,
it's that inspiration of, doing the dishes, or I'm cooking or something, and I'm listening, and it's like, well, I can't go beyond that. So, I mean, the conditions of your life, limit to when you can, you can pursue that inspiration, right?
yeah, yeah. And very often it's like, yeah, I'm gonna do this later,
and then
or
and then it's
I
gone.
mean,
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
gonna do it later. I'm gonna put it off, or just before I go to sleep, right? Just
yeah.
this is not the right time. There was a really great. It was who was the woman who wrote Eat, Love, Pray, Elizabeth. Anyway, I apologize, can't remember her last name, but she was talking about an interview that she did with Tom Waits,
Uh-huh.
and apparently he was saying, I'll be in the car and I'll get this great lyric or melody or whatever, and he'll go, "Can't you see I'm driving right now?" And he's for whoever the muse or whatever the source of his inspiration, he's kind of making that complaint, and I thought that was a really funny story, because sometimes these inspirations come at just the wrong time,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
you at least.
exactly. And then how do you
How do you
put
manage
put
that?
that into action or
Yeah,
remember it or whatever? Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
But still, I mean, it's. Um I think for myself and for a lot of us, and I frequently hear people saying that, yeah, I want to get inspired, or, you go to a concert, or especially maybe a talk. I mean, there's so many sort of keynotes, or maybe inspirational speakers nowadays. So you go to listen to this presentation, and you're sitting there because you want to get inspired, right? Probably most of the population in the theater or whatever are sitting because they want to get inspired. So what is it that inspires you, and what happens to you then? I think that's also a really interesting element of what it is, right? So what inspires you, and is it the possibilities, or is it the new ideas, or the opportunities, or the new perspectives, or just the person who's up there speaking, or the stories behind, or there's so many different elements to it. And I don't have the answer there, but I think there's so many different things that can be inspiring to us, and it creates this buzz. But then what do we do with it? Um, so I don't know, what is inspiring to you? When do you feel like, oh, now I'm getting really inspired?
Um, well, I can be really inspired in nature. I can be really inspired when I'm, you know, th- when I resonate with the information that somebody's sharing with me. But I think there are very specific conditions that really help allow for inspiration to come through.
Yeah.
And I think like one of them for sure is, you know, well, I think they talk about openness to experience, right? As a
Hmm.
really, the big five character traits. That's really one that really helps. But I
Mm.
think for me, it's, not putting yourself under pressure. If you put yourself under pressure to uh, you know, I've got to come up with something right now.
Mm.
I think pressure is a really big one that destroys inspiration. That because I mean it's very much tied to creativity, and we both know that creativity, if you're if you're putting yourself under pressure, it really undermines your creativity. So I think that's a really big one. I think that having the environment is a really good one. For example, like I'm looking at, I'm going to remodel my office here,
Mm.
because one of the things that I've really gotten clear about is on top of sort of the business and executive coaching that I do, and the trainings, I really want to develop my private practice more, and really help individuals find their highest potential. And I've been able to do that, connect with people virtually,
Mm.
which is great. But I'd really like to, I'm thinking about working more with young people. Like, I used to coach basketball sort of from
Mm.
16 onwards, helping them kind of figure out get clarity on their direction. So what I'm doing is creating a space for that. So I want to, and then I also want to create a really good space for writing,
Mm.
and so that's on my vision board too. Creating it's not like I have a problem writing here. I love where I live, so I can usually find, when I'm inspired, I can write pretty much anywhere. But
Mm.
if you create the space for that as well, and
Mm.
then on top of that, I've signed up for another Udemy course, just to improve my writing skills, because that's another thing. See, one of the problems, you're inspired, but then you don't have the skills, or you're not proficient in how to apply that inspiration. So I
Yeah.
think another big component is, mastery. Mastering your.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
think the areas that Dan Pink talks about in motivation
Mm.
also apply to inspiration, because your purpose is obviously, when you're very inspired, when you have a sense of purpose,
Mm.
and also the whole mastery piece about having the right skills, that when you are inspired, you can actually act on it. I think
Mm.
so. I mean, for me, those are some things that really help it. And then I think having the right mental state, right? And this is mindfulness comes into this, my goal of more mindfulness this year. But if you got this really chaotic mind, or you're not very calm, it's really
Mm.
hard for inspiration to come through. And then the last example that I'd like to give is, the one, when you're trying to get inspiration and you're, whether you're trying to solve a problem or you're trying to write a song or whatever, I think Einstein's example is really great, where, when he had to make a big decision, he'd go for a walk in nature, or he'd play his violin, he'd do something else. So if you're really focused on, look, I need inspiration here, go do something else, right?
Yeah.
I think those are kind of the things that I find help the most in order to allow the inspiration to come through.
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, I totally agree. What I think is interesting that it relates to a lot of the things that we talked about before. I mean, if we start by the motivation piece, that it ties in so clearly with only the intrinsic motivation, that it's only about what matters to you. You talked about the purpose, the mastery. And a lot about that seems to also be, and what you talked about with your office. I mean, how you're preparing yourself to become better at it. So the preparation part of you're setting yourself up for that opportunity. Also with openness, with that kind of mindset, of course. But you're preparing for your mastery, sort of. If it's signing up for a course or reading about things, and you're being open to new ideas, etc. So
yeah,
I think that's interesting. The other part about putting yourself in a situation where you allow yourself for a different pattern of thinking. For me personally, it's so much about when I travel. If I can sit on a train and just look out the window and I see a new landscape passing by, I always get new ideas, and it's this piece about again, neuroplasticism, where you create new connections for your brain, just to relax, and you allow the space in your brain to sort of reconnect. And I remember clearly, I was so disappointed by it, because it's this Swedish scholar who I highly respect. I mean, he's super productive, super intelligent, writes books that are amazing. Someone that I really inspire. And he said once in the interview that he think traveling was overrated. And I still get like frustrated when I hear that, because for me, it's so the process of traveling, the process of the journey, to just sit and look out of the window. It's amazing. It's for me, I always get inspired.
Yeah, so everyone has
ideas
their
come into space.
Yeah, that's why it's important to remember that everybody has their own way there. There are many paths up the mountain, right? So I think that it's really important to remember that there's not just one right way to get there. I think I described, and you have as well, we described some conditions that can create or allow the space for more inspiration to come through. But for some people, the travel is stressful and hectic, whereas for me, it forces me to get out of my comfort zone and out of my the habitual thoughts that I'm having when I'm home every day. So it depends on, everybody needs to find out what works for them, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So
but another part about inspiration is, of course, why is it important to, if we talk about it from a leadership perspective, for instance, so why is it important to be inspirational as a leader? We can clearly see when we're talking about it that it's something that motivates us, that makes us want to take action, perhaps if we're reaching that stage of approach motivation. So the ability to be inspiring, I think that's also quite interesting, when you're talking about how you can inspire yourself, but also maybe more importantly, in a leadership perspective or that situation, how can you inspire others? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big one for me, because obviously part of the reason we do this podcast is we're hoping that some things we talk about are going to be inspiring for others. I think whether it's in a leadership role or as a mentor or any kind of role model, you really want to try and inspire people to be the best version of themselves. And I think we can find this. That's why I strive to have relationships, both, whether it's with my partner or with with my friendships, it's being around people that you find inspiring. But I think in order to inspire others, I think it requires a certain degree of conviction. And I mean, you look at people who were inspiring speakers. One of the first that comes to mind is Martin Luther King, right? So he's very passionate, and he's very clear in his message, and I think there's a level of authenticity and conviction that needs to be there. So I think once you have found that inspiration for yourself, it's a matter of how do you convey it and how do you pass it on. And sometimes you don't need to be this great orator to inspire other people. You can inspire people with your example. And just I think for me, authenticity is, for me, it's one of my top 5 values, authenticity. So that's probably why that resonates with me so much. But I think for the most part, people recognize authenticity and they're drawn to it, right? They desire to have some of that clarity and the clarity of conviction and values and so on, and people who are actually living it, and people are drawn to that. So I think it starts with yourself, right? You first become the best version of yourself, or you master certain things and you live them, and you don't compromise. I think that is very inspiring to others. So I think that's as much as I can say about it. I think it's not something that you can you train someone to be an inspiring leader? I don't think you can. I think people, they find their way, they find their own inspiration, and they find ways to pass that on to others. So I think you start with finding your own inspiration, right?
Yeah. Thanks for reassuring that. I totally agree. And we talked about the importance of authenticity, and basically all research show that is the key element when it comes to transformational and effective leadership, actually. So, but what I think is interesting about that, because when maybe for a lot of people, and sometimes myself as well, when I think about who is inspiring or how can you be inspiring, you think about a really good speaker or someone who can really convey this vision or the future goals in a very good way. And of course that's a really good way of being inspiring, and it's a great leadership trait to have, or a leadership skill. And I would say that this is something that you can also practice, and you can teach someone to become better at conveying that vision or explaining that vision in a good way.
Yeah, I think you can coach. I think. Sorry to interrupt you. I think you can coach people into creating the right conditions. But I think being inspiring is just like being inspired. I don't think you can force yourself to be inspired, and I don't think you can say, okay, I'm going to be inspiring today. I think but I think you can help people create the right conditions to be inspired and to be inspiring to others.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that. Sorry, I sort of lost my.
Sorry, I took you off. I took you off your train of thought. I apologize.
No, but yeah, this part about that whatever you do, if you do it with authenticity, or if it's a behavior or what you say or whatever, but if it's your authentic way, you have no idea when you can be inspiring to others.
No.
And I think this is fascinating. I remember so clearly the first time ever anybody told me that I was an inspiration to them. I couldn't understand, like, what did I do? It was something that I did, and apparently had a big impact. And I was quite young at the time, and it made me really think, wow, can I be an inspiration? And for me, of course, that's really motivating as well when you get that kind of feedback that, wow, I can be an inspiration to someone else. That's fantastic. But it's not, obviously I'm not the kind of person who speaks eloquently about future fantastic grand visions, but it was just something that I did that had a positive impact, and that's great.
Well, I think it's important not to underestimate yourself. I think everybody can be inspiration to someone else, right?
Yeah.
And look, I've seen you at live events, at workshops, and I think you do a good job of at least motivating people. And I'm sure you've inspired a few people over your years. So,
Thanks.
yeah, I think that's actually another important thing to share with anybody who's, whether they're in a leadership role or whether they're a parent or whether they're just part of a social group. You can be inspiring to others just by following your path, finding your path and pursuing it. Right. I think about when we talk about inspirational people, they're often people who've overcome great challenges. Like in Canada, we had Terry Fox was a he was afflicted with cancer, and he lost his leg, and he ran he attempted to run across Canada to raise money for cancer research, and what an inspiration for the entire country. Got behind him, and in Vancouver there's a statue to him and so on, and hopefully that will inspire further generations. But it's these people that have these inspiring stories we talk about, right? So I think it's about, again, I talk again about authenticity, but it's really also about that clarity you find. And when you have the inspiration, because we have inspiration all the time, I think people don't often let it through, or they don't register it, and then they don't act upon it. And I think if you're one of these people who can follow through on, getting the inspiration, having the skills to do something with them, and then really pursuing a path that's inspired, that will automatically inspire other people, right? So I think it's having an example. It doesn't have to be, you have to be a perfect person, but there is an area of your life that maybe you can share with others that can be really inspiring, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Who is the perfect person? I don't know if
No,
that.
doesn't that person doesn't exist. I
No.
don't even think, I doubt the Dalai Lama would consider himself perfect, right? Although he's pretty far up there, but yeah. So I think that's, if you're, I don't think the ambition to be inspiring to others is necessarily the right one. I think it's when you aspire to be the best version of yourself, or to achieve your highest potential, you will
Mm.
naturally be inspiring to others.
Yeah. And isn't it wonderful when you can see, if you have that perspective and you just view people around you and think about how they inspire you in different ways? I mean, okay, so I've never done this, but I just kind of thought about it. But that would be a wonderful sort of trust building team exercise to do, to have a conversation with everybody in the room to let you know how you inspire me, because I'm pretty sure that you can find something in every single person
Yeah.
that inspires you in some way. And if you see that, that's when you're really becoming open to viewing these the wonderful qualities that each individual has. And I think that's a really nice approach to life.
Yeah, and I think this is the thing that so one of the things that undermines inspiration is actually a high level of competition. And so when you think about that example you just gave,
Mm,
if you're in a room full of people who are competing with each other, they probably won't find that inspiration. They'll find envy, jealousy, insecurity, right?
mm,
Whereas if you go to a retreat and everybody's aspiring to be the best version of themselves, and you hear people tell their stories, right?
mm,
Whether it's someone who's been afflicted with addiction and they overcame it, and they did great things with or they not even great things on the grand scale of things, but they overcame some poor choices, and they corrected and that can be an inspiring example,
mm.
right? So
Yeah.
it doesn't even need to be that you solved hunger or you created peace in the world. It can be just the smallest steps towards your own journey of improvement, and it can really inspire others, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, think about that difference then. If you have, if we take again a sports situation, if you have a team where individuals are feeling that they're competing against each other, and you have a coach that can't really that can't really handle that situation, or you have a situation where you have a coach with a team of individuals that are competing against each other, but creating an atmosphere of what is our common purpose, is our common goal,
Mm.
and how can we inspire each other? What can we learn from each other? Because there are, I mean, okay, again, I'm getting back into tennis that I love, but if you look at the top three male players in the world in history, I mean Rafa, Federer, and Djokovic, and see how they have inspired each other to become better tennis players. And they say this openly that, they have made each other become much better tennis players. So even though they're obviously very fierce competitors, and they have a really high sense of rivalry, but they're making each other better, and they appreciate each other because of that. So of course, they inspire each other, and make sure that they put their game into another level. And I think that's just, if you have that kind of attitude, you really, about talking about transcending yourself, right, or transcending your abilities. So,
Yeah, absolutely,
mm,
and
mm,
it's interesting when you make that you tie it into sports. Obviously, I've mentioned before, basketball is the sport that I'm quite passionate about, and I think it was this week or last week, the Dallas Mavericks retired Dirk Nowitzki's jersey number in the rafters, and there's
mm,
speeches made about his greatness and so on, but a lot of other international players were inspired by him. So it's through inspiration you can raise the ceiling of what's possible for other people. Just like when you go back to and I'm always blanking on his name, but the guy who ran the first one to break the 4 minute mile.
mm,
All of a sudden, as soon as he did it, like within weeks, other people beat it as well, and I think in terms of international basketball players that are playing in the American professional league, they there was a there are a few pivotal people who kind of open that door, and I think you can see the same thing when you talk about human rights or whatever. There are people who are willing to take risks and be a pioneer in a field or
mm,
in a situation, and really that inspires a whole generation sometimes to
mm.
follow a new path. And so
Yeah.
I think it's not to be underestimated what one person's actions can inspire in a nation, in a culture, in a generation.
Mm,
So I think that's why it's important not to undermine. When you talked about, well, I don't know if I'm all that's inspiring, but you just will never know how it is that you inspired someone else.
mm.
You can just give what you have to give and see how it's received, and it will inspire some people.
Mm. Yeah, and that made me think about another thing that uh, we talked a little bit about openness to new perspectives and ideas, etc. We talked about preparation for mastery, or mastery to become this intrinsic motivation to become really good at what you're trying to pursue. But there's also something about accomplishments, and this is something that I also can really feel strongly within myself, but also very clearly when you were just speaking now, when you see what is possible. So you see that other people have accomplished something. So, oh, you can actually run a mile within 4 minutes. Oh, you can actually win 20 Grand Slams. You can, I mean, we doesn't have to be sports, but constantly highlighting accomplishments, and they don't have to be grand all the time. Small accomplishments that are making us move forward, both as an individual. So looking back over the year, for instance, I mean, that's where we started today. What did I achieve last year? Oh, I did this and this and this. Oh, that's possible. It wasn't that difficult. I can move ahead now. I'm sure that, I mean, the typical situation at the end of the year or the beginning of the new year in an organizational context is always like, oh, we have these new objectives and they're crazy. We're never going to achieve them. But then if you look back, you basically always achieve the KPIs, the objectives. So, and if you're looking at that, oh, there might be a possibility that I can achieve these things as well. But also from a leadership perspective, to always highlight the accomplishments, to take a little bit of time to celebrate. Oh, we actually did this and this and this. And if it's a new behavior, or if it's a small milestone or a big milestone or a new customer, whatever it is. So
Yeah,
both on a personal level and on a professional level, to to highlight and take some time to appreciate what have I actually accomplished. I'm moving forward. Things are happening.
yeah, and I think that points to, well, there's a couple of good things there, and certainly recognizing where what was the trigger, what was the first step, and recognizing the conditions that created the inspiration for you, and trusting that inspiration will be there to find the solution. I think that's one piece of it. And then the other point about, it doesn't have to be something big. When people talk about inspiration, they sometimes think it's got to be this, awe-inspiring, this like the greatest idea ever. And inspiration comes in such little things. It might be just using the right word, or just the subtle changes in the way you live your life. I think inspiration can be very, well, mundane is probably the wrong word, but it can be very tiny and have a big impact, and just be the first step in the first domino in a whole sequence of events. So
Yeah.
I think those 2 points are really important that you made.
Yeah. And that's actually just thinking about that is wonderful. That's very small things can be inspiring and have a very big impact. I mean, you never know. I mean, when you're reading a book, or you're listening to a song, or viewing a painting or whatever, like
Exactly.
something might be triggered, and who knows what that's going to lead to. So
Yeah.
I love that's just that part of the exposure, to be exposed to new things, because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and that comes back to creating the conditions for inspiration, right? I think if you expose yourself to inspiring things, if you expose yourself to the same old thing all the time, or how you spend your time outside of work is, watching TV, which can be a great way to relax for people. I'm not putting that down, or the whole Netflix thing or anything. But if I like to listen to lectures or watch documentaries. I find inspiration in those things, but sometimes it's good to read a bit of fiction, and that can be inspiring too. But
Yeah.
I think remembering to create space in your life to allow that inspiration to come through. And I think we fill our lives with so much stuff, with routines and with distractions, that we're distracted from the opportunity to be inspired. So I think that's an important reminder. And I think sort of the last thing that I didn't want to forget to mention, because it ties into the whole reason I do a vision board, and the whole reason that we maybe set goals. And I think for goal setting and for leadership, this is important, because are the goals inspiring, right? Are the conditions around achieving a certain goal, is there anything inspiration about that? Or when you're setting people's KPIs, do you have some inspirational targets in there, some inspirational things to achieve? I think that's important. But in terms of creating inspiration in your life, so I'm a big believer in when you internalize things. I mean, the reason I do a vision board, or I create certain statements for myself, is because it internalizes the things that I'm trying to achieve. And then on an unconscious level, once you've internalized it, you'll get those impulses to make this choice or do this thing. And so when you've internalized what you really want, and you've got that clarity, part of that inspiration is just your unconscious going, hey, this is the moment. Go for it. This is the right opportunity to achieve that thing you've internalized, that you said that you wanted, that you told me you wanted. I'm telling you now, your unconscious self, I'm telling you now is the right time to take action. So I'm a big believer in inspired action. Inspired action, because people will do things because out of obligation. They should, they have to. and they they look for what's everyone else doing, and so they follow the same path as everyone else. But when you when you want to be inspiring, you go your own way, and when you feel inspired, you will also create your own path. And I think that's why it's important when you sometimes well, often procrastination is a bad habit.
Mm.
But sometimes when you're putting something off, and I don't want this to be an excuse for people to procrastinate, but sometimes it's just a matter of needing that right inspiration to take action. And so when you're taking when you look at your motivation, the reason that you're going to do something, if it's an inspired action or whether it's like I was having a conversation with someone about picking between job offers,
Mm.
and it's like, well, are you really inspired about this job that you're there was one that sounded like it was really inspiring, and there was another where it sounded like, well, this is logically the right thing to do, right?
Yeah.
And so when you see someone's eyes light up about this one opportunity, but this other one seems logically way better,
Mm.
and it's and then so it's just, I mean, you can't, obviously that was my external interpretation of it. Only
Mm.
that person can interpret their own feelings, but I think it's just recognizing that this is inspired action, and this is kind of this is very mental, this is logical, this is very, and there's no wrong choice, but
Mm.
one could definitely lead to a breakthrough, and the other could maybe, you know, keep
Yeah.
you on the same kind of treadmill that you're on.
Yeah, but when you see that, when you visually see that as a coach, and you can just provide that reflection, I
Yep.
mean, it can be eye-opening
Mm.
and create such a great awareness. Cause I had this exactly same situation with a client of mine before, so eye-awakening for me was, you just share what you see and say, oh, really? Wow, did I talk about? Yeah, I guess that's true. And it was just so it just increased the self-awareness about the situation to another dimension. So that
Yeah,
was really interesting.
absolutely. So I
Yeah.
highly recommend inspired action. So
Mm.
because what happens in those there's Mel, what's her last name? Anyway, she did the 5 second rule, and she talks
Hmm.
about taking action within those first 5 seconds. So when you have the idea, you have the inspiration to act on it,
Mm.
and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and do it, right. And she talks about that as an approach to motivation. I'm really having a hard time with people. I mean, I struggle with people's names at the best of times, but I mean, these are all people I've read. And if you know the 5 second rule, and her first name's Mel, and you'll
I
find her.
don't know her name. Yeah, no,
Yeah, yeah.
no. Mm.
Anyway,
Mm.
I've her books on my bookshelf. But
Mm.
anyway, I'm just saying that that's another one, sort of open the door to our own fears, and our own inner resistance will stop us from pursuing our inspiration, right? And
Mm.
and I think that's having having allowing yourself once in a while. I'm not saying you need to follow every impulse, because they're not all good.
No.
But when you can distinguish between that that inspiration and just the chatter in your mind, I think, or the kind of knee jerk response to something, that's not inspiration. So it's
Mm.
being able to distinguish between them, and that
Mm.
just takes practice. Just like is this intuition, or is this just my mind? It's about really practicing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a great place to leave people with how to practice pursuing your inspiration.
Yeah.
Is a great
Well,
habit to develop.
could I just add
Absolutely.
one more perspective to it, and which kind of dawned on me during our conversation, that when we're talking about inspiration in this way, it gives another kind of relevance to diversity. That again, coming back to exposure, but being exposed to different kind of people with different backgrounds, with different ideas, with different perspectives on things, with different interests, with different motivations, that you get such a different, wider palette of sources for inspiration. Like and what we're talking about, that you never know where you're going to find inspiration. You can find it from just yeah, different perspective of all of these things that we just mentioned. But it's a really good argument for diversity as well, that we can really inspire each other to achieve things that we didn't know that was possible before. I mean, if I didn't know that there was a continent on the other side of the Atlantic, you know what can happen. But if I realize, oh, there is something there, there's a lot more room for action.
Yeah,
um,
I think that's where that openness to experience comes in, and I think you need that in order to be open to diversity, right? Diversity of ideas and experiences, and I I agree with you. I think the one of the greatest things I've ever done was when I took 6 months off and I backpacked through Asia, and that changed my life. I think the seeing the way other people live and experience life, and the ways people find happiness and fulfillment in the simplest ways. I mean, when you go to poor countries and you find that people still have this sense of community and family and joy, and you realize you don't need all the stuff, right, in order to make yourself happy. That was a big learning, and just the freedom to be able to, to be able to move around and experience that and see the. I mean, it's such a valuable experience. And a friend of mine in Canada, he said, every world leader should be forced to backpack around the world for a year. It does give you such a different perspective on life, and appreciates people on every level of society. And there's you see the good and bad everywhere, and I think it just gives you a different perspective and a different appreciation, and a recognition that everybody is just they're just trying to make the best of this life they're given, and they want it. Everybody's kind of the same things matter. Your family, the people close to you, your health, and it's the same for everybody. So
yeah, definitely.
Okay, I took us off on a tangent there, but yeah,
No,
that was a really inspiring experience, and so yeah.
I mean, I had the exact same experience, and that changed my life for the past, for the last 25 years. My life took a very different course that I'm very satisfied with, because I took that journey, perhaps. So
yeah, absolutely. You never know where it could lead you,
no.
and the thing is, people are worried about making the wrong choices in life. I think that fear in itself will constrict you in ways, and cause you to make more mistakes. Or what is a mistake? I mean, a mistake is just where you made a choice and you didn't like the outcome, right? So there are no real mistakes. It's all just learning. So yeah, I'd say don't fear your inspirations. Within, it's just like when we talk about your comfort zone, and I don't encourage people to take this big jump outside. If you think your comfort zone is this circle and you can go up to the edge of the circle, but if you take this big jump outside of the circle, then you're going to be overwhelmed, and then you may not be up to it, and then you'll go, well, that was a failure. But if you go up to your comfort zone and you take that small step beyond, then inspiration, like you said, small steps, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to jump into the deep end.
No, definitely. Yeah.
All right. Should we leave it there for today?
Yeah, I'm satisfied. I think it was an inspirational conversation. So.
Absolutely. I hope I hope people listening were inspired by something we've said. Obviously, we strive to be inspiring, and certainly every conversation you and I have, I find little bits of information, not just information, but inspiration. So thanks for another one, Toby. That was great.
Yeah, thanks, Peter.
All right. So thank you, everyone, for listening. And we wish you an inspiring, great start to 2022. Hope it's a great one for you. And thank you for continuing to listen. And if you have any questions or comments, you can reach Toby through his LinkedIn site, and me through my website, peterteuscher.com. We'd love to hear from you, and any topics you want us to cover this year, please send them through, and we'll be happy to have a conversation about them. All right. Until then, take care, and we'll see you and talk to you next time.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.